Howdy y'all, coming at you from the cocina cavan, and posted something on Facebook about a bubbly kraut from my meal mentorship, and I figured I'd make a little video about kraut, so why the heck not? Making kraut at home is super easy. We find that when we eat probiotic-rich, raw or alive, cruciferous vegetables, we feel better. I posted a video on Facebook about the gut-brain connection, and check it out if you want, but there's definitely some science backing up the healthy gut, healthy mind idea. So, what do you need to make kraut? Not a whole lot. Cabbage, we ended up using some of this from tacos the other night. Cutting board, knife, jar, bowl, salt. This is the brine from my previous batch. As long as it's under the brine, you'll be fine, as they say. So I'm gonna get going. I have this honing steel. It's always good just to ensure you got good grip on your cabbage, to have a good sharp knife. This one's decently sharp. I could probably put it on this whetstone I have. That might be another video. But I'm gonna basically take off one of the outer leaves of this bad boy. We like the purple or the red cabbage based on the anthocyanins. And yeah, you could use any cabbage really. A lot of different things you can put in your kraut. I messed around with making kimchi, which is putting in spicy peppers and chili powder and daikon radish and all sorts of stuff. So this wasn't, super clean, no big deal. We just basically want this to rest on the top of the jar and keep it under the brine once we get it all mashed up. So I'm gonna take the core out. Obviously this has a flat surface, but that's kind of the key for working your knife safely. So I'm actually gonna just simply go down here, and there's my core. I'm gonna put the tip of the knife in the tip of the core, pop down, same idea, other side. Ta-da! Feed that to your worm bin. I could show you the worm bin a little later if you're really interested. It's a bunch of worms in a wooden box outside, kind of cool. So here, let's see if we can get it on this side. Dun, da, da, da. Try not to make the hospital video where we go to the hospital while showing how to make kraut. That would not be a good video. There's a little bit of core in there, no big deal. Get the big chunks out. All right, so I like to work in manageable pieces, like yay big, maybe a couple fingers width, nothing too gigantic. And then I'm gonna be working it upright. So I'm gonna be strips from the origin of growth, from the bottom to the top, if that makes any sense. We'll see. So fingertips back ideally. Get some clanging from your bowl. I like this big knife. This is like a 10-inch chef's knife. I think they call it a French chef's knife. But there's your idea of strip width. Boom, in the bowl. This side, fingertips back. I kind of like some chunkier kraut, so if you do it much finer, you get a softer end product. It really all depends on how long you let it ferment, but there you go. There's so many different things you can do with fermentation, and I would encourage you to make yourself a batch of kraut. I know that my Aunt Lisa is gonna mess around with it, I think, if she hasn't already, and Janelle, my aunt-in-law, what do you call that? Aunt-in-law? Your mother-in-law's sister? Anyway, they were like, hey, let's do this. I think they've already made a batch. But anyway, little pieces can go back in. This isn't gonna make a huge batch because it was kind of a small head, but this is just simple. Here's the size of that. It's semi-coarse, it's not super coarse. Nothing too crazy. Then the next move is gonna be to massage. So what you're doing here is you're just having fun with your vegetables and you're breaking them down. You're starting to get a little bit of the salt covering all the veg. And the salt is gonna help the cabbage release its natural brine. If your refrigerator is really cold, this becomes a bit of a cold-handed challenge where your fingers end up getting super cold. And if you buy a big head of cabbage, you may have to do a couple of rounds of slicing and packing. But here we go. Just gonna pop over to ensure I'm recording. Oh yeah. And so yeah, here's my tiny little kitchen. There's an egg from our chickens in the background over here. Bing. Chatted about them briefly. We got 3 chickens when we moved in. And yeah, they're pretty cool. They eat a lot of your veggie scraps. Gonna help reduce the waste stream a bit. So I'm gonna be putting the core of this cabbage into the worm bin, which then ends up making worm compost or worm castings, which is super great for your plants, house plants, garden veg, whatever. Great for your hairline. Just kidding. But fermentation. There's a great book on fermentation from Sander Katz, Chelsea Publishing, called The Art of Fermentation. And it's beefy. It's like 500-ish pages. I don't know, probably longer. And he goes through the history of it. I mean, people have been fermenting vegetables for thousands and thousands of years. You know, you could say that it's really the original preservation method from large-scale food production. And cabbage works really well. Like I said, kimchi-wise, I think some of the original or traditional kimchis have like seafood in them, and I haven't messed around with putting seafood in them. I have messed around with like fish sauce, adding fish sauce, and that adds some nice, check this out. Not quite at the drip stage, maybe a little bit, little drip action. I'm gonna keep going as I'm talking, but the kimchis are delicious. I think that the daikon radish imparts a really nice crunch and a really nice flavor, and I've had some really delicious daikon radish kimchis, kraut cheese, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, now that we're in autumn, fall is here. Maybe y'all have been successful enough in growing some cruciferous veg, some cabbages, perhaps. But also, you know, root crops work well in terms of radish, carrot. You can mess around with all sorts of different stuff. My co-op has a pretty good selection of root veg. I know we've done some with burdock, just a tiny bit. Can be a little heavy in the medicine side of the spectrum, so you might not want to do too much burdock, but just be aware that you can ferment nearly everything, and as long as it's under the brine, you can keep it there out at room temp for a while, a long while actually. There's quite a few examples in that book that have proven, you know, fermentation can be a really long-term storage technique. All right, getting some good brine out of this, some good moisture. I gotta say that if you buy cabbages that are kind of old at the store, hard to say, you know, how old they are because they store well just in general, but I'm gonna start packing it into here now, and I'm gonna just just lean it towards the bowl. But let's say you buy a cabbage and you're intending on making kraut and you leave it in the fridge for a week or 2 or 3 and then you try to make kraut with it. It can become hard to get it to make brine on its own because of, you know, the fact that you've let it dry out in the fridge. Your fridge definitely can dry things out pretty quickly. So just be aware that if you're doing this and you want to make it with the natural brine without having to add anything, you're going to want to kind of just buy the cabbage as fresh as you can, or of course harvest it out of your garden would be best, and make it that day. You know, it's good to taste this. I've just done it enough to kind of know it's a very delicious amount of salt. There's not too much there. I can't say I have any measurements. You know, my cooking is very, I don't know, fundamental in that there's no, I don't measure. I do bake, and sometimes I'll measure some of the ratios. Obviously, you wouldn't want to put in, let's say, baking soda. I made some cookies the other day, and my little helper dumped in an extra tablespoon of baking soda, which I tried to fish out and had a hard time doing. Let me just say, you don't want to add a tablespoon of baking soda to your cookies. It's too much. Okay, you do not need this. This is simply a stick that I'm going to be smashing this down with, and just trying to get those veg worked down and get some more moisture out of them. This head started to dry out just a little, so there's not going to be noticeable brine right away, but I have this, which is from my previous batch, which I'm going to be dumping on top of this. But this is a little bit of like, you know, a little therapy. Get your hands dirty. They turn a little purple. You could say that they're getting more clean, in fact. Salt water is definitely cleansing and grounding and good for you in many ways. So yeah, let's take a quick look at what I've got going on here. There's not really any, you can kind of start to see that brine bubbling up, but I am going to add this, which is my previous batch's super alive. You know, there's a lot of life in this, every last drop. And that's going to help kickstart this, right? So kickstart it, meaning get this going, get this bubbling, get this fermenting. And then I've been typically just leaving it out at room temp for a week. You can go a lot longer, but a week is good, 2 weeks is good. You could just experiment to see what your palate wants. So now in terms of these leaves, or this leaf, which was the outer leaf, pop it in here, feed that to the worms, bring this down. Now you can see that liquid, right? You can see that brine. Woo! Right there. And if you needed to, you could definitely put a weight on it. They sell these weights, like glass weights or ceramic, or people put like bags of water. You know, you could do a jar like this filled with brine and just set it on there. That's an option. Or sometimes, like, let's say, you know, you've got one of these guys, and we'll just mess around like this. We'll put this in there, and then I'll toss this. We've been using these reusable plastic lids. All right, so ta-da, under the brine, you'll be fine. There it goes. Voila. That is it. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share.